I want to say, before we get this video started, this is a miracle that my big camera has made it inside this car, because it is a very small car. And it's a tall man. And he is a man spreading right now,
Absolutely.
as they call it. Right off the bat, whose car was this? And for many people who clicked on this video, I'm sure don't even know what this is. So let's start with who owned it, what's the story of the car?
So I bought this car last year from Missy Elliott, Missy Misdemeanor Elliott.
Yeah, the freaking hometown hero for me, because I was in Virginia Beach for a long time.
Yeah, so she bought it brand new at Spyker Atlanta, which was the dealership that I worked at. I began working there in 2009, which is the year this car is. It's a 2009 Spyker C8 Laviolette.
The C8 before the C8. Also, Ed, these didn't come with radios.
No.
But Missy Elliott had to have one. Of course. So there's a sub down here where my feet go.
And this is the radio.
Oh yeah, and here's the head unit. Pretty high-tech stuff.
It took some work, but we were eventually able to listen to Missy Elliott in Missy Elliott's car.
The engine in this is a 4.2 liter V8 from Audi.
Correct.
You're saying it's more similar to the A8s than the R8s.
Yeah, still the same general engine, but in the way they've got it set up.
So the number one thing that people always talked about with Spykers was the interior. It was the most memorable part about this car, especially the shifter. This is the thing that stuck in my brain for over a decade.
Absolutely.
Everything else, I don't remember too much. I don't remember this, the plexiglass, which is really cool. But I do remember the dashboard, and I remember the shifter, and it is a manual. I think there's a common misconception that it's just like an auto, and
because Pagani has a similar shifter in the Lyra that looks that way, but it's a pure single clutch sequential automatic. But no, this car has a lot of interesting features that you now would pay MSO at McLaren tons and tons of money for, like louvered fenders and a functional roof scoop, center lock wheels, and an inboard push rod suspension.
Ignition switch is a literal like fighter jet switch.
That's right.
Pretty cool.
But that won't do you any good until you open up the glove box.
I'm sorry, what?
You take the Audi key.
Okay.
You stick it way. I'd let you do it, but you get way too familiar with me.
No way is the ignition in the glove box.
That has to be there, and then you can hit your engine start button.
Guys, the ignition, like...
It's a process. It's a sequence. And it has no power steering, or power brakes, or traction control. Oh,
also, by the way, everybody, when I put the GoPro on the back of this car, I pushed it forward. It's only, what, 2,700 pounds?
Yeah, it's very, very lightweight.
It weighs nothing.
Yeah, and it's a full clamshell design, and so it's super cool the way the car was put together. It is very much like Pagani's approach.
Oh yeah, by the way, to open the door, the button is behind the mirror. So imagine if you were a valet, and you're like, how do I get in this thing? Hopeless. This car is the most anti-valet car of all time, because not only the glove compartment thing,
exactly.
But then you have the key, and then the ignition switch, and then the door, and then there's no door seals. So probably people are visually looking for the window seals. Another thing is that we have the vents on the engine cover itself, which means more water and stuff probably gets in. So first things first, Dad, this thing sounds good.
Yes, right. Much better than a V8 R8 or an A8 or anything.
By a lot. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. So it kind of has, how do I describe it? It's a little bit of everything right off the rip. So you have the boutique-ness of a European or even arguably an Italian handcrafted thing, but this is, you said, from the Netherlands or Holland.
And I mean, this car was up against, an F430 and a Gallardo.
Which is not fair.
Right.
Yeah,
well, because they each have, 20 to 30% more power.
Oh, man. Okay. So this makes 400 horsepower.
Right.
But the issue was, on paper, you can't sell a driving experience, right? So with the Gallardo and the F430 and all that, you're gonna go with that. Probably,
you would, yes,
right?
Yeah, and this car cost $100,000 more than either of those cars did when it came out for the 2006 model year.
I think it would have had a better chance if they tried to price match it or get close to it, but I know they're trying to go for this super fancy boutique look.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it was built for the same amount of money as a Gallardo.
No.
And now you take it somewhere, they're going to park it next to the hypercars just because it is so rare. So they only made about 260 cars from 2005 to 2010, and then they went bankrupt, and then they bought Saab, and then they went bankrupt again.
Right.
Yep. And so, but Spyker was actually a company that they made cars and airplanes.
Yeah, that's why their logo has the propeller, right?
Yes, exactly. And the European cars could have the 4-spoke, non-airbag steering wheel.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there were 2 different steering wheels in the U.S. This is the Gallardo steering wheel, obviously.
I just noticed that. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. And
just a little bit more bougie.
A bit bougier with the perforated leather and all that. And that's really it. Is they just like Pagani outsources their powertrains.
Sure.
These guys just got it from Audi, so they got to build the stuff they wanted to build, and then they let Audi handle the rest. And so it's a fairly serviceable car. It's a fairly simple car mechanically, and I think it's just a very pleasant and charming car to be in. There's nothing like it. You don't say, oh, it's kind of like this car.
No, like within 30 seconds, you know it's different. And I love the door cards, and the diamond stitching doesn't feel as cheap as a lot of stuff is. Yeah, the shifter is super cool, especially because it's mid-engine, right? It's mid-engine, and you see the linkage go all the way into nowhere, right? That is awesome. That's amazing. Because it's so usable all the time, but you're still getting a high, like a high revvy happy V8, which is really neat. Oh yeah, by the way, the e-brake is on the passenger side, so we're stopping for lunch, right? I have to reach over and do this in the passenger footwell to park. So there it is. You had a perfect terminology for this car. It's steampunk. It's an overused term, but it is a steampunk car.
Accurate.
Because it feels almost like it has elements of the 30s and the 40s, and then has the modern amenities of the 2010s or the 2000s.
Sure.
And when you look at the gauges, it feels like airplane stuff. So did you buy this directly from her?
I did, yeah.
Okay, cool.
And I'd met her when she'd bring it in for service at the dealership, and so I knew that she had one, and it's the only one in the state of Georgia. I didn't have any trouble getting the license plate to say Spyker.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. Akon had one for a while, but he sold it. He actually had one of the press cars that he repainted from black to white. My biggest thing with the shifter, or my biggest fear of the shifter, was I wasn't going to know where I was. Right.
Because if you look at this linkage, you're like, that seems pretty unpredictable. Because it's going through the firewall.
Right.
You're like, I don't know where that goes. You know, who knows if it's cable driven or whatever. But at any moment, you feel how light it is.
Yep.
But it has more comfort than a Lotus Elise or something like that, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
You drove this all the way to Amelia Island, right?
I did, yeah, and it did awesome. I mean, I'll say it rained, and this car is not well sealed.
I'm sure.
So you had to carry a lot of towels.
I see this as a toy. You know what I mean? It's a really bougie toy.
Yeah, I don't see it ever being anybody's only car. But I'd always wanted one. I just thought they were so cool and so special, and you never see them. And
well, you were saying, you know, when we pulled it out of your garage, you said, that's a pretty good looking car. He goes, it's got its wacky angles. I'm like, it does. But what I really like is, I think they are very smart with their color contrast. Because they made a roof scoop look good. That's number one. That is a hard thing to do. I actually like it more than I thought. I was like, Ed, this makes me think of Drive Network. Like over a decade ago, because I remember every journalist who drove this at the time was raving about it. Yep. And I was like, okay, how come I've never heard of this car company? How come there's so few of them? But why don't I see them more often? And I never saw one in person until I went to the Middle East. It's the only time I've seen one. What was the fate of the company again? So after the Saab thing and they went bankrupt or whatever?
They had announced that they wanted to build a car called the Aileron, which is going to be the successor to this car. And they never really got it off the ground.
That's what I thought.
They made a few of them. They did some events, some testing. It was in some magazines, but it never really worked.
Oh, power brakes.
Power brakes, yeah.
That's right. No booster.
No booster. And it's wild. This
guy is
angry. Really impatient.
Oh, that feels nice. But even just like rowing through is in the power delivery, since you're in a car that only weighs 2,700 pounds, it just goes.
Yep.
Every time I've been getting on this car, I'm expecting the weight for it. And
Yep.
you don't have the weight for it. It just goes.
Does it? Well, there you go. Now you've driven a Spyker.
Yeah, I don't know. I really like this car. Like, I know they're very niche and very weird, but it does feel special.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that was the #1 thing is it gonna feel special? I don't know. It's definitely easier to drive than I expected to. That's a big win as well.
It makes every drive an event.
Ed, thank you so much for this experience. As always, I absolutely adore this thing. I actually like it more than I thought, but maybe it's because we've been so blessed to drive so many different things in our lives. So when we do drive something different, it does feel kind of special. And on the note, Ed, where can people find you?
Oh, at Ed Bolian, at vinwiki, all the things.
And I typically upload on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, and I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy. Have a wonderful day.